Four more federal cabinet ministers will not run for re-election, meaning the Prime Minister will likely shuffle his cabinet in the coming weeks. This is happening, of course, at a time when his leadership is increasingly being questioned. Some Liberal MPs are mounting an effort to try to get rid of Justin Trudeau, and that is expected to come to a head this week as Liberal caucus meets in Ottawa on Wednesday. For more on all of this, I caught up with outgoing Minister Dan Vandal earlier. Dan Vandal, thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here.
So you've decided not to run again in the next election whenever we end up in that spot. So maybe start with that part of the decision. Why did you decide now was the time for you to get out of politics?
Well, it's something I've been thinking about for quite a few months. First of all, 2025 will mark 30 years since I've been representing St. Boniface at either the municipal or the federal level. I've been elected 8 times in St. Boniface, St. Vastel, and I've had a wonderful time and great experiences. 2025, I will also turn 65 years old, and I just think 30 years, 65 years old is a good time to maybe turn the page, start another chapter in your life, and do other things. And it allows me to spend more time in Winnipeg and St. Boniface, my home, with family, with friends, and less time on airplanes.
And listen, I went to school in St. Boniface, so I know it's a lovely place to spend time. But I'm sure you also were thinking about how this might look, obviously, given some of the frustration people are having about the Prime Minister's leadership, how you guys are doing in the polls right now. Did any of that stuff play into your decision?
Not at all. Not at all. Really, my experience at the federal level has been nothing but positive. My memories are positive. I support Prime Minister Trudeau 100%, and I know that we're going through a tough time. We're going through a dark time, and we have to go through the difficult darkness because I think better times are on the horizon. I have confidence that the polls are going to tighten up as the closer the election comes, and really, I have confidence that there's still another chapter in the Liberal Party to win a fourth term.
I don't know if you're talking to any of the people in caucus, and certainly you don't have to tell me about the conversations, but I wonder what you think about some of the people who are threatening to do this at caucus next Wednesday to tell the Prime Minister he needs to go, and whether you think that this makes sense right now in terms of where the party is and where we are in the election cycle and the rest of it.
Listen, I can understand people have anxiety about the upcoming election, with the polls being where they are, and people are concerned. I talk to Manitoba Caucus, I talk to Northern and Western Caucus, and I talk to individuals all the time. Nobody has approached me to sign anything. I made it very clear to everyone I talked to that I have confidence in the Prime Minister's leadership, and I think that these sorts of issues are best resolved out in the open at national caucus meetings, where we can actually, that's what they're there for. They're there to talk about the concerns we have with whatever issue. In this case, it's the next election and the leadership of the Prime Minister. I think those are things that we need to talk about at national caucus, and I would have preferred it to go that way, public or in camera, but public amongst ourselves, and try to iron out our differences that way rather than signing sheets that are then hidden away somewhere.
What do you think could be done better or differently to improve Liberal fortunes right now? I know you said the polls will tighten up, and generally in an election they do tighten up, but there's a big gap, and I wonder whether you think there's something that could be done better, maybe aside from the leader himself.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I think we are putting forward the right policies for the time. We know that economically we are on pretty solid footing, and we know that allows us to reinvest back into services that Canadians appreciate, such as dental care, such as $10 a day child care, such as the Canada Child Benefit. Those are the right policies for the time. I think we have to, as a party, start fighting back a little bit more effective against the opposition. We know that thus far they're spending a lot of money on ads. I mean, I watch the local news at 6 o'clock in Winnipeg, and there's a Pierre Poilievre ad. I think we have to do more of that. We have to show that we're willing to actually fight for it, and get into really defend what it is that we've done. And I don't think Canadians have seen a lot of that, but I'm extremely confident that's going to change very soon. And believe me, there's lots to go on with Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives. There's lots we can do to differentiate ourselves and go after them. Bring the fight to them.
Yeah, I know you're not leaving right away because, of course, I imagine there'll be a cabinet shuffle. I don't know if you know anything about that. Feel free to tell me if you do, but otherwise you'll stay until the next election. But as your time as a federal MP and a cabinet minister, what are you most proud of, Dan Vandal? What are you glad that you were a part of?
Well, first of all, I'm really glad that we were able to bring forward the Canada Child Benefit that's raised 500,000 kids out of poverty.
Yeah.
Listen, Rosie, I've been around 30 years. I've worked with I worked with other liberal national governments, conservative national governments. I've worked with NDP provincial governments, conservative provincial governments. Poverty levels have never gone down, no matter which level of government has been in power for the last 30 years, except for the last 6 or 7 years when we introduced the child benefit that actually took 500,000 kids out of poverty. That's something that I'm forever going to be proud of. Being a local guy, Winnipegger, I'm glad of the partnership we struck up with the Southern Chiefs to redo, revigor, reconstruct the Hudson's Bay building.
Yeah.
Working with True North and the Southern Chiefs just down the road to reimagine Portage Place and there's going to be a health center there, affordable housing, and we're working with the Manitoba Métis Federation further down Portage on a heritage Métis Heritage Center. So there's lots ongoing in the city of Winnipeg, but there's so much more to do.
Well, when I was in Winnipeg over the summer, I saw some of those changes, and certainly you can see that the downtown's starting to turn around a little bit there. As a fellow Winnipegger, I was happy to see that. Mr. Vandal, thank you for making the time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
In our caucus, as in any caucus, there is going to be a wide range of views. I am absolutely confident that the vast majority of members of our caucus support the Prime Minister.
Liberal caucus is set to meet for the first time since we learned about those calls from a group of MPs to oust Justin Trudeau as leader. We also know, of course, that 4 more cabinet ministers have said they won't run in the next election, which is fueling speculation about a possible cabinet shuffle. How serious is this threat to Trudeau's leadership? Let's bring in our Sunday Scrum. Vastel is an editorial writer for Le Devoir. She's in Ottawa. Robert Benzie is the Queen's Park Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. He's, of course, then in Toronto. And Gary Mason is a columnist with the Globe and Mail, and he's in Vancouver. Gary, I don't know if you slept at all because of that crazy election of yours. Why? That's just wild. We're going to talk about it shortly. Adrian Dix is coming up after the break. But let's talk about what's happening here, because this caucus meeting on Wednesday is supposed to be sort of the culmination of where this potential revolt is at, Marie. But it's not really clear at this stage what is actually going to happen. What do you think is the likelihood that a group of people get up, say to the Prime Minister at the microphone, you got to go, and that this becomes a problem for him?
I don't know. And I don't think the Prime Minister knows. I think the issue, the uncertainty comes from the fact that we've had these before. We've had now 3 MPs call for the Prime Minister to step down. But every time, because they were one after the other, every time in the short term, no one followed suit. So it's unclear to me if this one will kind of falter, or if people will remain determined and on Wednesday actually go to the microphone in caucus to ask for him to leave, or even come out publicly. I'm not exactly sure, but I think just the fact that we're wondering is bad enough for the Prime Minister. I mean, I don't think it's tenable to have this unrest going on for months now, and it keeps festering, going away, but then coming back, going away, but then coming back. And it does make governing a little bit tricky. There's a lot going on, there's a lot of crises going on, and trying to reshuffle your cabinet and tame the unrest while you're trying to govern is certainly not the easiest of tasks, and it's not the best image when you're trying to convince people that you deserve to govern for a couple more years.
Yeah. Robert, David Cochrane is the one who's really been pushing this story, at least for us. And when we last talked to him, it did seem as though there's a group of people, and then there's a few people here and a few people there, but no one is sort of getting together and saying, this is what our action plan is, and this is what will happen next. And that to me seems where maybe there's an opportunity for Trudeau to sort of, divide and conquer, if you will, to hold on.
I think, Rosie, that's what's going to happen on Wednesday. I've been speaking to some Liberal MPs over the last couple of days, and there is unrest. Maria's right. Remember, these people, there's 150 of them or whatever. They risk losing their jobs. So as Trudeau goes, they go. Now, yes, he got them their jobs in the first place, but if he costs them their jobs, all that goodwill of the last sort of 9 years will fade away. I think the one thing that Prime Minister's office has done in the last week or so that is quite artful, at least this is what MPs tell me, is leaving these 4 or 5, if you count Pablo's seat in cabinet seat in Montreal, 5 empty cabinet jobs open, and that is a good way to get ornery backbenchers to behave themselves. Now, I was speaking to one Liberal MP who said that has probably quelled a little bit of the unrest. However, it's sort of like, do you want to be getting a promotion as everyone else is getting on the helicopter in Saigon and flying off? It's a little bit like end of days, and I think that's going to be a problem for him. So I don't think that Trudeau knows what Wednesday is going to look like. He's a very effective and smart politician, and wily and ruthless, but these polls have been so bad for so long, Rosie, I don't know.
But again, though, Gary, because they don't have a what's next piece to this, it's not like a Chrétien Martin thing, right? There's no obvious person to go in, and there's not even any clarity around whether someone else would improve fortunes. It's possible, but we don't actually know that part either.
Yeah, I think that's a huge factor in this whole thing too, Rosie. There isn't like this consensus savior waiting in the wings that everybody believes in and believes could, if not win the next election, save as much of the furniture as possible. I think that is a real fear inside the party right now, that and inside the caucus. I think some of them or a lot of them are resigned to defeat come the next election, but it's like how bad that defeat is. And if it's like a really bad defeat, then you're looking at possibly 2 terms in opposition and not just 1 term. And so I think that some of the the insurgents, we'll call them, that's kind of what they're thinking is. They want to at least give somebody else a chance to give a little bit of a spark to the party, so they can at least land in opposition and have a chance of returning to power after one term of polio.
I was, because I'm still on Facebook, I was reminded yesterday that yesterday marked 9 years from the first time Justin Trudeau won and formed his only majority government. And I mean, some of this, Marie, is just after 9 years, people are like, I'm not sure there's anything to be done. But I am hearing the same thing all of you are hearing, that people are concerned about the brand.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And the polls, the little polls that we've seen about what if someone else was leader, don't exactly indicate that the results would be drastically different than what we're seeing now, right? And I think if some Liberals, because a lot of Liberals have been looking to the United States and saying, well, the Democrats changed candidates and look how well that went, I think they might be getting a little dose of reality these days that the boost that that Kamala Harris got at the beginning is sort of faltering already. It's not really staying. So even that sort of source of inspiration is not really panning out. I do expect the Prime Minister's office to try and come to caucus on Wednesday with some updates maybe on campaigning, because that's one thing that the caucus was quite concerned about, that they're not ready and they haven't started, while the Conservatives have started for months. And yes, this dangling of cabinet posts, also if they hold the shuffle after the presidential election, that maybe tames some nervous MPs for at least 2 more weeks. But you also make disappointments when you only name 5, because they're saying it's not a huge shuffle. So if you only name 5 MPs, there's a lot of disappointments. You can name parliamentary secretaries, but still, you're not going to reassure 100-something MPs that are afraid of losing their seats.
I mean, some of this is because the Prime Minister and his office maybe have not been responsive to these concerns too, right, Rob? Like, the concerns have been, as Marie said, for months, and the responsiveness has been, I don't think, probably adequate to satisfy people.
Yeah, I mean, Rosie, it's not surprising that that a government would get complacent after 9 years in office, as Marie said. I mean, they've had 3 election wins, yes, to only 1 majority, 2 minorities, been through a global pandemic. There is a kind of fatigue with Mr. Trudeau. I think, but if you notice the profane flags and banners you see flying all over Canada, frankly, they don't say F the Liberals, they say F Trudeau. And I think and remember, here in Toronto, in the St. Paul's by-election, Don Stewart, the victorious Tory candidate in a very safe Liberal seat, his brochure had Prime Minister Trudeau's photograph on the cover. So Mr. Trudeau was the ballot question. I think he was probably the ballot question in Montreal as well, where the Bloc Québécois won in David Lamette's seat, formerly Paul Martin's seat. And so I think at a certain point, if you lance the boil and Mr. Trudeau leaves, and it's, say, Mélanie Joly or Dominic LeBlanc or Champagne or Mark Carney or someone else, even if they're not a savior, at least the antipathy toward Mr. Trudeau would be tackled, and then the Liberal brand might be salvaged. So maybe it is you only win 50 or 60 seats in the next election, but that's better than winning 20 or 30.
That's right. Gary, I only have 30 seconds, and I just want a 30-second take on what the heck happened in your province last night.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's some people in Ottawa that will be looking and asking that same question, because the BC Conservative Party, Rosie, I mean, they existed basically in name only 14 months ago. Yeah. And then John Rustad took over. He was basically, in theory, handed a playbook by Pierre Poilievre. He hammered on all the same issues that Pierre Poilievre has been hammering on, crime, disorder, the cost of, living, the carbon tax, all of those issues. And people, bought it and wanted that and rejected the sort of the progressive policies of the NDP. So I think there's a lesson here for the people in Ottawa. I mean, look what happened in BC, because that playbook is exactly Pierre Poilievre's playbook.
Okay, and we're going to talk about that after the break with Adrian Dix, who did win quite handily his own seat, but we'll see what he has to say about his party. Thank you all for that first take. Go have a coffee. We'll talk in the next hour. Appreciate it.